Yo, what's up, my peeps out there in the digital space? Happy Wednesday. Happy Wednesday. Happy Wednesday. This is your shooter, Cedric Jenkins, founder and creator of Your Money Matters. Y'all know I try to come here on certain mornings, and not particularly every morning, but come here some mornings to provide some kind of inspirational, uh, thought-provoking things to where we can look at some things with a different lens, a different perspective, where we can probably do have some different habits, and so that way we can get some different results, right? And I'm going through this whole process myself. But this morning I want to talk about having a will. All right. And so my question, and I had to ask this, and I'm a talking third person because I'm talking to myself as well as sharing this with others. So as you can see there, the question is, Cedric, do you have a will? Do you have a will? So let's talk about what is a will. What is the purpose of having a will? If you was to look up the definition, I didn't look up the definition, but I'm gonna paraphrase what a will is. A will is really a documentation that has instructions of what to do with wealth that you accumulated and how it should be passed down to your relatives that comes behind you. Okay. A will is a documented instructions that tells what to do with assets that you accumulate and what to do with it when you are no longer present. Simply put, a will is to protect assets that you accumulate and to pass it down to the next generation. Now, in doing so, when we're passing down inheritance, the person who's doing that, and I'm gonna get into that in a minute, has to think 3 generations beyond. You got to have a future vision. Okay, you got to have a future vision. You got to see beyond yourself when we're living. If we're just thinking about ourselves, then we're being selfish. And because of the fact that we're thinking only for ourselves, we're not being good stewardess. Because a stewardess thinks beyond themselves. They have the welfare of others. Okay. If you were to go to Proverbs 13 and 22, we know that scripture, and the scripture goes as a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. I just mentioned that in order to do so, in order to pass down inheritance, we have to at least have the vision to pass it generations, which is our grandchildren's. All right. Now, notice in that verse, it says a good man. All right. Now, I want to understand biblically that God believes in headship, and he's given that responsibility to a man. That's that communion or that talk that he had with Adam at the beginning. That was part of his will to Adam. All right. Now, I'm not going to get into this whole thing because I know I see it socially that there's this discrepancy in biblical writings. The Bible was plagiarized and all that good stuff. I'm not going to get into that. I just know what I believe from what I read, and that is God has given a divine responsibility to man through the provision of headship to leave an inheritance to his children's children. All right. But here's what I'm going to do. Because of the fact we living in a time where men are absent from being at head, being in the household, and not providing to their children, we're going to look at man as mankind, meaning we're going to include women in this because we know that with the absence of men, women are being both mothers and fathers. So now, when we include women, guess what? And you don't have a man that's is not providing headship, not involved with their children, right? You have responsibility to have a will to pass down to your children, inheritance. So if you accumulate assets over the course of your living, you need to have a will so that you can pass it down to your children's children. All right. Now, when we look at it from that aspect, we're talking about from a physical aspect, right? So we're talking about any kind of physical wealth, whether it be a home that you done paid off, a car that you done paid off, some money through investments and things of that nature from a business. Those are assets. We can't pass down liabilities. Unfortunately, we've been passing down liabilities, but we shouldn't be passing down liabilities. We should be passing down assets. Okay. And so you need a will to pass that down to your children's children. But you got to have that vision, a future vision to see in front of you. You have to have a selfless spirit to say, I need to have a will so that these assets that I accumulated can be passed down through my family for my children's my grandchildren. And if we don't have a will and we have assets, remember, a will is to protect and pass down your assets. So if you don't have a will, if you have assets and you don't have a will, you don't get the protection. And if you don't get the protection, you're not able to pass down an inheritance. That means somebody else is going to come and get your assets. So when we look at it in that frame, it's important for us to have a will, even if we don't have assets, but we're looking to accumulate assets. It's always good to have a will. Now I just spoke that. Now I'm speaking that to help us understand how a will works in the natural. But also, we need to have a will in the spiritual. It's the same framework. We have to have a spiritual will to pass down to our children's children. What is that spiritual will? The spiritual will is we have to become servants, disciples, transform into disciples to where we help others do the same thing so that we can advance God's kingdom. And we do that in God's will. And when we're able to do that, when we do that successfully, then the inheritance that God has for us will be given to us, not to just us, but to our children's, and then to also our children's children. Even in that spiritual will, there are inheritance that we have to pass off to our children's children. Think about it like this. We've watched a relay race before. If you watched it, you may even participate in it. And you have a team of folks, maybe 2 or 3 team, to where you run this race, and toward the end, I mean, you have the end goal of getting across the finish line. Well, before you can get to across the finish line, you run a particular pace or a particular distance to where you have to hand that baton off to somebody else. And they have to do the same thing, right? And then that last person takes it to the finish line. In life, that's how it is framed up to be. Right now, as the adult, if you're a parent, you have the baton right now. And it's your responsibility to pass that baton off to the person that's behind you, which is your children. And you have to instill in your children to do the same thing, to pass that baton off. But you do it through a will. So I'm not just speaking about a physical or natural will. I'm also speaking about, Cedric, having a spiritual will. So the question is, Cedric, do you have a will? And I'm not just, do you have a natural will? First of all, do we have a natural will? If we don't have a natural will, get a will. Because we know that when our loved one pass away and there are some assets that needs to be identified and to determine who gets it, there's no will in place. Now you have chaos. Now you have people who can come in and intercept. So now if you have a piece of property that's family property and it is not in the will to determine who it goes to next, then guess what happens? The state intervenes and they can seize property. So it's best to have a will if you have assets. Well, will can protect and pass on assets if you instructed to do. The same thing from a spiritual standpoint. There are some spiritual assets that we will accumulate over the course of our life that we need to pass on to our next generation, to our children, and then to our children's children. We do that through the provision of a will. And if we don't have a will, there is no way that we can pass down inheritance to our children's children. So if you don't have a will, let's get one. All right. I'm not just talking about a natural will. I'm also talking about a spiritual will. We need both. Okay. We need a natural will and we need a spiritual will. All right. This is yours truly, Cedric Jenkins, founder and creator of Your Money Matters. Your money matters because of the fact we get up each and every day to earn it. You have a God-given right to keep it. We'll holler at y'all later. Y'all be blessed on this Wednesday. Peace.